am a scientist, so I'm trained as a scientist and a STEM educator. So, what this means is that I have my Bachelor's of Science in Chemistry and my PhD in Pharmacology. I took a very non traditional route compared to most scientists to get into the education space. And so, generally, scientists will branch out into education directly by working and having students work on projects like research projects and things of that in the lab. For me, I wanted to get more into the classroom, so what it means to be engaged with students in the learning process. So I took a very non-traditional pathway through an internship opportunity offered by the National Institutes of Health, or NIH, that combined research with teaching. And so as part of that, I got an opportunity to learn about um, interactive learning, pedagogical approaches, such as bringing technology into the classroom, what it means for students to work in groups, what it means to bring real world case studies into the classroom, and things of that nature. I really, really, really enjoyed it. I taught following that as a biology professor for several years, teaching genetics, cell biology. I really enjoyed working with my students. As part of this, I worked on several government funded grants that look at teacher preparation programs for K 12 science teachers in the Richmond, Virginia area. And then following that, about 3 years ago, I switched into the education policy space through a fellowship that I did as part of the American Association for the Advancement of Science. So that is known as AAAS. And AAAS allows scientists and medical doctors to essentially come into the space of policy and have a seat at the table. So how do we have effective changes around those who actually are part of that field or who sits day by day and work within that workforce? And so I went to the National Science Foundation and I evaluated education programs that were offering internship opportunities for students within the graduate education space. I truly enjoy it. My background, as I mentioned, is in chemistry, but I didn't mention that I minored in mathematics when I was in college. And so I'm always a math person, especially even as it came to my genetics class, who I love anything that has to do with numbers. And so being able to do evaluation of education programs that are all across the country was very, very, very exciting for me. I did it for 2 years, and now I'm at the intersection where I can have effective changes, but more so on the ground. So I love working in the community and giving back. The reason why I got into the education space is really because I wanted to take what I learned and how to navigate the space of STEM, so science, technology, engineering, and math, and provide opportunities for those who might not know how to get there. Because even for me, as I navigated the space, there are many things that I didn't know. And so that really got me interested in getting into the education space. So at the same time that I did my training program, I volunteered to do a lot of community based work with churches and organizations that essentially brought content to children in the community. So I had to learn what it meant to develop education content for children who were 5 years old or who were 12 years old. So it gave me that perspective and also how to engage their parents and bring awareness of this whole STEM movement to communities and to parents who might not even know what that means. And so I truly, truly, truly enjoyed that. And I'm able to use many of those things in the job that I currently do. So I work at FHI 360. This is based in Washington, D.C. I'm in the Washington, D.C. office, I should say. We're based out of North Carolina. So that's FHI 360. I work for the National Institute for Work and Learning. I am the STEM 2D coach. And so what that means, as I said earlier, STEM is science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. But in this case, I am the liaison for the Johnson and Johnson Women in STEM 2D initiative. And so Johnson and Johnson now includes manufacturing and design as part of their STEM awareness and their STEM work. So that is STEM 2D, the Women in STEM 2D initiative. It's a global initiative. And so I am the liaison for FHI 360 to Johnson and Johnson, and essentially I provide content expertise in this space for Johnson and Johnson, but also mainly focusing on how do we bring education programs to Johnson and Johnson employees for girls all around the world. And so many of these employees might not have a trained scientific background or an education background like myself. And so I'm able to provide my skill set in these areas to help them develop exciting and very exhilarating programs for children who might not necessarily have an opportunity to ever engage in STEM activities. And so these are all supportive of some of the principles that I held in my classroom, like active learning and working in groups and developing critical thinking and how do we apply real world concepts into what we're learning and how do we practice by doing. So it encompasses many of those things. And so my day to day is totally different. It ranges from working with Johnson and Johnson employees on engaging employees with the program. It could be something as how do you take an activity or how do you take children to a science center or what does it mean to bring children to a Johnson and Johnson plant or something of that nature, to creating videos around how do you make slime, how do you build a building structure that will withstand pressure and things of that nature. My experience is very different, and I love it because it reminds me of being in the classroom. And by that, what I mean is that no today in the classroom was ever the same. I mean, I worked with so many students on any given day. And so it's just a joy to be able to not really know what my day is going to be like. Some days I do, but can't really plan and say it's definitive, you know. And so some of the courses that I took as a student that got me to where I'm at is chemistry. Like, I love math, I love chemistry, I love cardiovascular biology. My work in graduate school was centered around cardiovascular biology and how do you help with the drug development process for patients who have hemophilia A. And so hemophilia A is a blood clotting disease. And so I was able to work in gene therapy, so making what I did at the bench very practical to patients. And so I love that. I got to work with students throughout this time, mentoring them, even myself doing internships as an undergraduate student. So these were some of the extracurricular activities that got me excited in STEM and was able to create a STEM identity for myself. Like, I could see myself being a part of this STEM space because I got a chance to participate in an internship. I got a chance to mentor others and to guide others in those things. And so they were very critical for who I am today. And as I mentioned earlier, some of the extracurricular things I did even beyond graduate school was really going into the community to work around the space of what I'm passionate about. And so my dad always said, if you're passionate about something, it's the one thing you'll wake up every day excited to do. And for me, volunteering my time, I started volunteering in the education space since I was in undergrad. And so I didn't realize it then, but it was that innate part of who I am that was already calling me to this space. And I had no idea until later on in graduate school that it's something that I truly enjoy. And so That's a few things about who I am, what I do, a personal thing that I definitely enjoy doing outside of work is I love going to the trails. So I love being by the water. I grew up in the Caribbean, and I mean, the beach was literally down the street from my house. So I grew up with that. We went to the beach all the time. And so here I just love being able to walk by the trails and to have a fresh air and be like, oh, this is so amazing. And I also enjoy singing. So while I was in graduate school, I balanced my work with singing. So I worked with part of like to help me with my classes. I use music, so I've always loved music. My dad always wondered. He's like, "How can you study or read and have that music like playing?" So I use music to kind of get me into the space and where I can completely focus on what I'm doing. And so to this day, I still love music. I still use it to kind of guide me and control and just help me to focus on what I'm doing. And even when I was in graduate school, I worked with a lot of my classmates in teams. So it's all about being collaborative and realizing that sometimes we won't have the answer to everything. So I work with my classmates to kind of keep me grounded in my classes, and even at work today, I'm able to apply that. I That was one of the critical things that I told my students on the very first day of classes. So when I was in the classroom, I always told them, hey, learning is amazing, but we're not here to go and essentially come and try to memorize things. You have to come out of that space where you're realizing we're dependent on each other. We learn by doing. You have to actively engage in this process, and you learn by teaching others. So it's not that everything is for you to just keep it in, and hoard it. It's you work and realize you might have challenges with one thing and someone else might be stronger in that, and so you kind of feed off of each other. And that's what I apply even in my current workspace in what I do today. And so, I mean, it's amazing. Principles that we learn growing up become very, very, very important, even in the work field. And so, I'm excited again, as I said, about the work that I do, especially around women in STEM, because I'm a Black female in STEM, which is very untraditional. That is, you don't generally see that. And so I'm excited to continue supporting this space, and especially also for underrepresented groups like African Americans, Hispanic populations. So I'm eager to continue working in that space and just to be a role model and show them I did it and so can you. I mean, I've been a role model for many of my students who have now gone on to medical school or graduate school and all of these amazing things that they're doing today. And for some of them, they came to me and they were like, "You are the first Black professor that I've ever had." And that is very shocking. And so I am just happy to be part of this space that support women in STEM, but in doing so, it also benefits underserved groups and their communities.